The Blériot XI was a French aircraft, used by Louis Blériot on 25 July 1909 to make the first flight across the English Channel made in a heavier-than-air aircraft. This achievement is one of the most famous accomplishments of the pioneer era of aviation, and not only won Blériot a lasting place in history but also assured the future of his aircraft manufacturing business. The event caused a major reappraisal of the importance of aviation. The English newspaper The Daily Express led its story of the flight with the headline, "Britain is no longer an island." It was produced in both single and two-seat versions, powered by a number of different engines, and was widely used for competition and training purposes. Military versions were bought by many countries, continuing in service until after the outbreak of World War I in 1914. Two restored examples, one in the United Kingdom and one in the United States, of original Blériot XI aircraft are thought to be the two oldest flyable aircraft in the world. Design. The Blériot XI, largely designed by Raymond Saulnier, was a development of the Blériot VIII, which Blériot had flown successfully in 1908. Like its predecessor, it was a tracked configuration monoplane with a partially covered box girder fuselage built from ash with wire cross bracing. The principal difference was the use of wing warping for lateral control. The tail surfaces consisted of a small balanced, all-moving rudder mounted on the rearmost vertical member of the fuselage and a horizontal tailplane mounted under the lower longerons. This had elevator surfaces making up the outermost part of the fixed horizontal surface. These tip elevators were linked by a torque tube running through the inner section. The bracing and warping wires were attached to a dorsal cabane consisting of a pair of inverted V-struts with their apexes connected by a longitudinal tube and an inverted four-sided pyramidal ventral cabane, also of steel tubing, below. When first built it had a wingspan of 7 meters and a small teardrop-shaped fin mounted on the cabane, which was later removed. Like its predecessor, it had the engine mounted directly in front of the leading edge of the wing, and the main undercarriage was also like that of the Type 8, with the wheels mounted in cast-string trailing arms which could slide up and down steel tubes, a movement being sprung by bungee cords. This simple and ingenious design allowed crosswind landings with less risk of damage. A sprung tail wheel was fitted to the rear fuselage in front of the tailplane, with a similar cast-string arrangement. When shown at the Paris Aero Salon in December 1908, the aircraft was powered by a 26 kW 7-cylinder REP engine driving a 4-bladed paddle-type propeller. The aircraft was first flown at Issy-les-Moulineaux on 23 January 1909, but although the aircraft handled well, the engine proved extremely unreliable, and at the suggestion of his mechanic Ferdinand Collin, Blériot made contact with Alessandro Inzani, a famous motorcycle racer whose successes were due to the engines that he made, and who had recently entered the field of aero engine manufacture. On 27 May 1909, a 19 kW Inzani 3-cylinder fan configuration engine was fitted. The propeller was also replaced with a Chauvière Intégrale 2-bladed propeller made from laminated walnut wood. This propeller design was a major advance in French aircraft technology and was the first European propeller to rival the efficiency of the propellers used by the Wright brothers. During early July, Blériot was occupied with flight trials of a new aircraft, the two-seater Type 12, but resumed flying the Type 11 on 18 July. By then, the small cabane fin had been removed and the wingspan increased by 79 centimeters. On 26 26th of June, he managed a flight lasting 36 minutes 55 seconds, and on the 13th of July, Blériot won the Aero Club de France's first Prix du Voyage with a 42 km flight between Étampes and Orléans. The Channel crossing. The Blériot XI gained lasting fame on the 25th of July 1909, when Blériot crossed the English Channel from Calais to Dover, winning a £1,000 prize awarded by the Daily Mail. For several days, high winds had grounded Blériot and his rivals, Hubert Latham, who flew an Antoinette monoplane, and Count de Lambert, who brought two Wright biplanes. On the 25th of July, when the wind had dropped in the morning and the skies had cleared, Blériot took off at sunrise. Flying without the aid of a compass, he deviated to the east of his intended course, but, nonetheless, spotted the English coast to his left. Battling turbulent wind conditions, Blériot made a heavy, pancake landing, nearly collapsing the undercarriage and shattering one blade of the propeller, but he was unhurt. The flight had taken 36.5 minutes and had made Blériot a celebrity, instantly resulting in many orders for copies of his aircraft. The aircraft, which never flew again, was hurriedly repaired and put on display at Selfridge's department store in London. It was later displayed outside the offices of the French newspaper Le Matin and eventually bought by the Musée des Arts et Métiers in Paris. Subsequent history. After the successful crossing of the English Channel, there was a great demand for Blériot XIs. By the end of September 1909, orders had been received for 103 aircraft. After an accident at an aviation meeting in Istanbul in December 1909, Blériot gave up competition flying, and the company's entries for competitions were flown by other pilots, including Alfred Leblanc, who had managed the logistics of the cross-channel flight, and subsequently bought the first production Type 11, going on to become one of the chief instructors at the flying schools established by Blériot. In February 1912, the future of the Type 11 was threatened by the French army placing a ban on the use of all monoplanes. This was the result of a series of accidents in which Blériot aircraft had suffered wing failure in flight. The first of these incidents had occurred on the 4th of January 1910, killing Alia Couteau and Delagrange, and was generally attributed to the fact that Delagrange had fitted an over-powerful engine, so overstressing the airframe. A similar accident had killed George Chavez at the end of 1910, and in response to this the wing spars of the Blériot had been strengthened. A subsequent accident led to a further strengthening of the spars. Blériot, understandably, took this matter very seriously, and produced a report for the French government which came to the conclusion that the problem was not the strength of the wing spars but a failure to take into account the amount of downward force to which aircraft wings could be subjected, and that the problem could be solved by increasing the strength of the upper bracing wires. This analysis was accepted, and Blériot's prompt and thorough response to the problem enhanced rather than damaged his reputation. Further development. The Type 11 remained in production until the outbreak of the First World War, and a number of variations were produced. Various types of engine were fitted, including the 120 degrees Y configuration, full radial 3-cylinder Inzani, and the 37 kilowatts and 52 kilowatts 7-cylinder Gnome rotary engines. Both single and two-seat versions were built, and there were variations in wingspan and fuselage length. In later aircraft, the tip elevators were replaced by a more conventional trailing edge elevator. The tail wheel was replaced by a skid, and the former house roof 5-member dorsal cabane being replaced by a simpler, four-sided pyramidally framed unit similar to the ventral arrangement for the later rotary-powered versions. Blériot marketed the aircraft in 4 categories: trainers, sporter touring models, military aircraft, and racing or exhibition aircraft. Civil use. The Type 11 took part in many competitions and races. In August 1910, Leblanc won the 805 km Circuit Relay race, and another Blériot flown by Émile Aubrun was the only other aircraft to finish the course. In October 1910, Claude Graham White won the second competition for the Gordon Bennett Trophy flying a Type 11 fitted with a 75 kW Gnome, beating a similar aircraft flown by Leblanc, which force-landed on the last lap. During the race, Leblanc had established a new world speed record. In 1911, André Beaumont won the Circuit of Europe in a Type 11 and another, flown by Roland Garros, came second. Louis Blériot established his first flying school at Étampes near Rouen in 1909. Another was started at Pau, where the climate made year-round flying more practical. In early 1910 and in September 1910 a third was established at Hendon Aerodrome near London. A considerable number of pilots were trained. By 1914 nearly 1,000 pilots had gained their Aero Club de France license at the Blériot schools, around half the total number of licenses issued. Flight training was offered free to those who had bought a Blériot aircraft. For others it initially cost 2,000 francs, this being reduced to 800 francs in 1912. A gifted pupil favored by good weather could gain his license in as little as 8 days, although for some it took as long as 6 weeks. There were no dual-control aircraft in these early days, training simply consisting of basic instruction on the use of the controls followed by solo taxiing exercises, progressing to short straight-line flights and then to circuits. To gain a license, a pilot had to make 3 circular flights of more than 5 kilometers, landing within 150 meters of a designated point. Military use. The first Blériot XIs entered military service in Italy and France in 1910, and a year later, some of those were used in action by Italy in North Africa and in Mexico. The British Royal Flying Corps received its first Blériots in 1912. During the early stages of World War I, 8 French, 6 British and 6 Italian squadrons operated various military versions of the aircraft, mainly in observation duties but also as trainers, and in the case of single-seaters, as light bombers with a bomb load of up to 25 kg. Famous Blériot in monoplane pilots. Oscar Bieder, Swiss aviator who flew over the Pyrenees and the Alps in 1913. Baron Karl Kalsedestrom, who made the first flight of a heavier-than aircraft in Norway on the 14th of October 1910. He made a flight of 23 minutes and reached a height of 300 meters. Jean Conneau in 1911 won the Paris-Rome race, the Circuit Europe on the 7th of July and the Daily Mail Circuit of Britain race on the 26th of July 1911. Georges Chavez, French-Peruvian aviator who crossed the Alps in 1910, but crashed on arrival and was killed. Dennis Corbett Wilson, Anglo-Irish aviator who made the first successful flight from Britain to Ireland in April 1912. Leon Delagrange, one of the first people to fly an aircraft in France, killed on the 4th of January 1910 flying of Blériot XI when a wing failed. Carlo Piazza on October 23, 1911. Captain Piazza of the Italian Royal Army Air Services conducted the first aerial reconnaissance flight between Tripoli and Aziza during the Italo-Turkish War. John Domenjoz performed aerobatics in South, Central and North America in 1914 to 1918. His gnome rotary-powered Blériot XI is displayed at the National Air and Space Museum, Washington. Roland Garros won second place in the 1911 Circuit of Europe race, and set 2 world altitude records in 1912 in an adapted Type 11, flying to 5,000 meters on 6 September 1912. Claude Graham White won the 1910 Gordon Bennett Trophy race held in New York flying of Blériot. Eugene Gilbert went to the Blériot School in 1910, after having built his own small unsuccessful aircraft in 1909. During a flight across the Pyrenees Mountains in the 1911 Paris to Madrid air race, he and his Blériot XI were attacked by a large eagle, which Gilbert drove off by firing a pistol. Trygve Gran, Norwegian aviator, first to cross the North Sea from Scotland to Norway in 1914. Maurice Guillot, French aviator, visited Australia April to October 1914. Flew Australia's first air mail and air freight from Melbourne to Sydney, 16 to 18 July 1914. Gustave Hamel flew the world's first regular ML service between Hendon and Windsor in September 1911. Vasily Kaminsky, a famous Russian futurist poet, one of the pioneering aviators of Russia. Jan Kasper, Czech aviator, first person to fly in Czech lands on 16 April 1910. Hubert Leblanc, a former racing car driver, he took up aviation and designed his own monoplane design. On April 2, 1910, flying of Blériot XI, he became the second fatality of the type, falling onto the rocks at San Sebastian, Spain. Alfred Leblanc broke the flight airspeed record on 29 October 1910 while flying of Blériot XI. His speed was calculated at 68.20 miles per hour. On the 11th of April 1911 he raised the record to 111.8 kilometers per hour. Jan Olieslagers, lieutenant in the Belgian army during the First World War, Earl Ovington, first air mail pilot in the United States, used a Blériot XI to carry a sack of mail from Garden City, New York to Mineo, Long Island. Adolphe Pégoud, first man to demonstrate the full aerobatic potential of the Blériot XI, flying a loop with it in 1913. Together with John Domengeaux's and Edmund Perrien, he successfully created what is considered the first air show. Harriet Quimby, first licensed female pilot in the United States, first female to fly the English Channel solo, died on 1 July 1912 when she and her passenger were ejected from her new Blériot XI. René Simon. In February 1911, the Mexican government engaged René Simon, a member of an aerial circus touring the southwestern United States, to reconnoiter rebel positions near the border city of Juarez. Émile Tadéoli, Swiss aviator who first flew on the 22nd of March 1910 in his newly bought Blériot XI, and flew about 150,000 kilometers during the next 5 years, using various aircraft, among them the Blériot XI, Morane Boral monoplane, Defoe 4, Defoe 5 and SIIS-13 seaplane. Variants. Blériot XI, 1908, the first Type 11, powered by a 22 kW Wheeler engine, displayed at the 1908 Paris Salon Exposition, first flown at Issy on 18 January 1909. Blériot XI, 1909, the first aircraft re-engined with a 19 kW Inzani engine and with wings enlarged from 12 to 14 square meters, fitted with a flotation bag for Blériot's cross-channel flight. Blériot XI Militaire military single-seater, powered by a 37 kW gnome engine. Blériot XI artillery very similar to the militaire version, but with a fuselage divided into 2 sections so that it could be folded for transport. Single-seat training version. Blériot XI type école, a trainer with considerable wing dihedral looped cane tail skid, tip elevators and other modifications. Blériot XI R1 Penguin, ruler ground training aircraft, fitted with clipped wings and a wide track undercarriage with a pair of forward projecting skids to prevent nosovers. Some examples were fitted with a 26 kW Inzani engine and others with old 37 kW Gnome engines that were no longer producing the full power output. Blériot XI from March 1912 with two-piece elevators and high fuselage skid. Blériot XI Parasol, aka Blériot Guerin, modified by Lieutenant Guan and Henry Chazelle with a parasol wing and split air brake rudder. Blériot XI. In January 1910 the BIS introduced more conventional tail feathers and elliptical elevators with a half-cowled Gnome engine. Blériot XI Tandem, standard tandem two-seat touring, reconnaissance training model, powered by a 52 kW Gnome 7B rotary piston engine. Blériot XI BIS Coat-to-Coat, February 1910 two-seat model, with side-by-side seating and a non-lifting triangular tailplane with semi-elliptical trailing edge elevators, with several variations such as floats, extended nose, modified tail skid and other changes. Wingspan 10.97 meters. Blériot XI hydro aeroplane, two-seater float plane with wingspan of 11 meters powered by a 60 kW Rhone engine. First flown with an extended rudder with a float on the bottom. This was later replaced by a standard rudder and a float fitted under the rear fuselage. Blériot XI artillery, military two-seat model, powered by a 52 kW Gnome rotary piston engine. Two aircraft versions of the same aircraft with differing elevators. Blériot XI GE Acute NIE military version, designed for easy transport. It could be broken down, reassembled in 25 minutes. Blériot XI Vision Total, XI modified with a parasol wing in July 1914. Blériot XI Auteur, powered by a 60 kW Gnome rotary piston engine and used by Roland Garros in altitude record flights in August 1912 and March 1913. Blériot XI BG, two-seat high-wing parasol model. Blériot XI Concours Militaire, tandem three-seat model, powered by a twin-row 14-cylinder, 100 kW Gnome double lambda rotary engine. Span 11.35 meters, length 8.5 meters. Thulen A. License built in Sweden. Military operators. Argentina, Argentine Air Force. Australia, Australian Flying Corps. Central Flying School AFC at Point Cook, Victoria. Belgium, Belgian Air Force. Bolivia, Bolivian Air Force. Brazil, Brazilian Air Force. Bulgaria, Bulgarian Air Force. Chile, Chilean Air Force. Denmark, Royal Danish Air Force. France, French Navy. Greece, Hellenic Air Force. Guatemala, Guatemalan Air Force. Kingdom of Italy, Corpo Aeronautico Militare. Japan, Mexico, Mexican Air Force. Norway, Norwegian Army Air Service. One only. Trygve-Grans, New Zealand, Royal New Zealand Air Force. One aircraft named Britannia. It was in service from 1913 to 1914. Romania, Russia, Serbia, Sweden, Swedish Air Force. Swedish Navy. Switzerland, Swiss Air Force. Ottoman Empire, Ottoman Aviation Squadrons. United Kingdom, Royal Flying Corps No. 2 Squadron RFC, Number 3 Squadron RFC, Number 4 Squadron RFC, Number 5 Squadron RFC, Number 6 Squadron RFC, Number 9 Squadron RFC, Number 10 Squadron RFC, Number 16 Squadron RFC, Number 23 Squadron RFC, Number 24 Squadron RFC. Uruguay and Air Force survivors. In addition to the aircraft used by Louis Blériot to make his cross-channel flight in 1909, on display in the Musée des Arts et Métiers in Paris, a number of examples have been preserved, both the British and American restored to airworthiness examples, each now over a century old and believed to be the two oldest flyable aircraft anywhere on Earth, are usually only hopped for short distances due to their uniqueness. Airworthy aircraft. A 1909 built Blériot XI, with British civil registration J.Klank, is on display at the Shuttleworth Collection, Old Warden, England. It is the world's oldest airworthy aircraft, powered by a three-cylinder W-form Inzani engine, identical to Blériot's original cross-channel aircraft engine. A restored and flyable Blériot XI, powered by a 120 degrees angle regular radial Inzani three-cylinder engine, and identified by Blériot factory serial number 56 and bearing U.S. civil registration N60094, is at the Old Rheinbeck Aerodrome. It is believed to have been built only 3 weeks after the Shuttleworth example. A Blériot XI, the oldest airworthy museum aircraft in Sweden, manufactured in 1918 under license by ATA Enoch Thulen's Aeroplane Works, in Landskrona, Sweden, as Type Thulen Air, has been owned by the Museum of Science and Technology in Stockholm, Sweden since 1928. Following a 2-year restoration by Mikael Carlsson, the Blériot XI made what was probably its maiden flight to celebrate the centenary of flight in Sweden, at the Stockholm Festival of Flight on 20–22 August 2010. Registered with the Swedish Civil Air Traffic Authority in 2010 as SHAEC, the Blériot uses its original rotary engine, a Thulen-built copy of the Gnome Omega. At the Stockholm Festival of Flight, the Blériot took off and landed no less than 6 times from a grass strip at the Royal Park, and was finally rolled 200 meters back to the museum exhibition hall. Although not a survivor, a reproduction of the Blériot XI, Le Scarabée, flown over the city of Montreal by Count Jacques de Lesseps in 1910. The volunteers at the Canadian Aviation Heritage Centre in Saint-André-Bellevue spent nearly 15 years building this exacting reproduction from original blueprints. Its first flight took place in September 2014. It is currently on display at the Canadian Aviation Heritage Centre. Display aircraft, Musée des Arts et Métiers, Paris, France. The original aircraft, Musée de l'Air et de l'Espace, Le Bourget, France. Museo Nacional de Aeronáutica in Morón, Buenos Aires Province, Argentina. The aircraft has replica wings and is powered by a W three-cylinder Inzani 25 horsepower engine. Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, Washington, D.C., United States of America. Swiss-born pilot John de Menjos's Blériot XI was manufactured in 1914 and powered by a 37 kilowatts Gnome RAF Museum, Hendon, England, factory serial number 164, and powered by a 6-cylinder Inzani. Army Aviation Museum, Fort Rucker, Alabama, United States of America. Canada Aviation and Space Museum, Ottawa, Canada. License built by the California Aeroplane Manufacturing and Supply Company, United States in 1911 and powered by an Elbridge Aerospecial 60 horsepower, 4-cylinder, water-cooled engine. Cradle of Aviation Museum, New York. Originally purchased by Rodman Wanamaker, the first aircraft to be imported into America, and formerly in the Old Rhinebeck collection of Cole Palin, Old Rhinebeck Aerodrome, of 2nd Blériot XI in the collection now on static display, was formerly flown under NOM Omega rotary engine power at the aerodrome before heading off for display for a period of time at the US Intrepid Sea Airspace Museum in New York City. It was built in the USA in 1911 by the American Aeroplane and Amp Supply House of Hempstead, New York, as a cross-country, longer-ranged version with a copper ventral fuel tank, and had been in storage at least since November 1915 before its discovery in 1963, and restored in 1975-76 by Cole Palin, Powerhouse Museum, Sydney, Australia. The aircraft, flown by Maurice Guillot with first Australian airmail from Melbourne to Sydney in 1914. New England Air Museum, Windsor Locks, CT, a restored Blériot XI with a Detroit Aero engine built in 1911 by Ernest Hall. Museo del Aire, Madrid, a Spanish-built Blériot XI, the Villanova Acerdo. National Technical Museum displays the original Blériot of Jan Kasper. Specifications. Data from General Characteristics. Crew. 1. Length 7.62 meters. Wingspan 7.79 meters. Height 2.69 meters. Wing area 14 square meters. Empty weight 230 kilograms. Power plant 1 times Inzani 3CYL, fan 3CYL. Air-cooled fan-style radial piston engine, 19 kilowatts. Propellers, 2-bladed Chauvière Integral, 2.08 meters diameter. Performance maximum speed, 75.6 kilometers per hour. Service ceiling, 1,000 meters.